3 minutes ago, the center of Super Typhoon Fun Wong tore into the Philippines, but the immediate threat was far less predictable than the 185-kilometer-per-hour winds. It was a crisis of perception, a moment when sound became a weapon of mass confusion. The sound that ripped through the chaos, that turned fear into outright terror, was the shrill, unmistakable blare of a tsunami alarm. This ringing siren across coastal towns marked more than just an atmospheric event. It signaled a devastating trust deficit. You see, there was no seismic activity. There was no underwater landslide. The earth itself was calm. Yet, the alarm sounded, and with it, the terrifying question. When your life depends on clear data, but the official signal is a lie, who do you trust? This video is not just about Super Typhoon Yuan. It is about the moment institutional integrity fails, and how information collapse becomes the second disaster. We will expose the alarming truth about the error that caused this widespread panic, and teach you the 3 apps you need to immediately verify if your alarm is screaming a lie. At 1,600 local time, the physical reality was already brutal. Super Typhoon Fun Wong's eye was situated off Aurora Province's battered coast. Sustained winds of 185 kilometers per hour, gusting to 230 kilometers per hour, were sweeping an 1,800-kilometer gale field across Luzon and the Visayas. The government's highest warning, signal number 5, was in effect across northern and eastern Luzon, pushing the system to its absolute breaking point. The scale of the physical response was immense, a testament to Filipino resilience. More than 1 million people were ordered to evacuate, leaving their homes with just a single bag, carrying children wrapped in raincoats, moving before nightfall. Shelters were filling fast in Aurora, Catanduanes, and Biliran. Over 300 flights were grounded, and all sea travel was suspended, with wave warnings posted for heights up to 14 meters. Power systems across the impact zone began to fail instantly, as the first bands of the typhoon snapped lines and toppled trees. But the chaos was compounded by the subtle, insidious knowledge that the system itself was fragile. The land was still soaking wet from the immediate predecessor, Typhoon Cal. River gauges across Luzon reported levels not seen since last year's worst floods, with the Cagayan River already past the critical threshold. The Magat Dam was forced to release over 2,200 cubic meters per second in a desperate, controlled attempt to avoid an uncontrolled breach. This environmental saturation meant that every additional drop of rain was a direct, immediate threat, risking sudden landslides and flash floods. The underlying physical vulnerabilities only worsened the effect of the false alarm. Infrastructure damage from the last storm remained the critical weak point. A 180-meter breach in Baylor's coastal seawall was held back only by sandbags. The Magat Bridge, a key supply artery, was restricted to light vehicles. The message from forecasters was a grim admission of systemic exhaustion. The land simply cannot take more water. This reality created a psychological trigger, making people hyper-responsive to any sound of danger, especially the sound of a tsunami warning. The real danger here is the amplification of panic, when the public knows the physical system is already on the verge of collapse. When the soil is saturated and the seawall is patched with sandbags, any signal, even a false one, can trigger a catastrophic chain reaction of fear and mass hysteria. This is the definition of a climate stress test on a nation's institutional bandwidth, a point where even the simplest alarm can break the spirit of survival and recovery. With rivers already at extreme levels and fragile defenses weakened, the margin for error was non-existent. Even a moderate surge could be catastrophic. Storm surge is now the most immediate, high-probability threat, looming large along the eastern bays and river mouths. PAGASA's latest advisory painted a grim picture. Water heights could reach a staggering 2 to 4 meters in critical areas like Baylor Bay, Limon Bay, and the Cagayan Delta, easily enough to submerge single-story homes and tragically sweep away vehicles. The vulnerability of the physical world became an accelerant for the psychological crisis. In Baylor, the timing was deadly. The tide was set to peak just after midnight, increasing the likelihood that the storm surge and high tide would dangerously overlap. Local officials were in a desperate race against the clock, urging immediate evacuation before the deep darkness fell. The NDRRMC Coastal Desk confirmed that shelters in Aurora and Camarines Norte were already stretched to their limit, and many of these evacuation centers were themselves precariously located within the projected flood zone. This reality fueled the deep, underlying public trust deficit. When the designated safe haven is also at risk, where is the integrity of the official message? The surge polygons in Lamon Bay alone showed that up to 8,000 people lived inside the 4-meter risk zone, a terrifying concentration of vulnerability. Local hospitals and power substations fell within these same polygons, raising the critical concern that emergency care and basic services could be instantly cut off. Further confirmations from the Department of Public Works and Highways revealed a shameful secret. Seawalls in areas like Malbourne and Infanta were only patched with temporary sandbags after the damage from Typhoon Cal, and were highly unlikely to withstand this new onslaught. The logistical nightmare deepened as the Red Cross reported less than 3 days of food and water supplies in the hardest-hit provinces, with relief trucks already staged inland, but unable to access blocked ports and flooded roads. The memory of the wall of water from the devastating Typhoon Haiyan was fresh in the minds of the residents, compelling them to act before confirmation. Many had already fled their homes, carrying only essentials and hoping desperately that the surge would not reach their properties this time. It was at this point, precisely when the psychological pressure was at its maximum, that the false alarm became a crisis of faith. Sirens blared across coastal towns, terrifyingly labeled as tsunami warning. Social media ignited with panicked claims, sending already displaced families rushing away from the shore again. The core of the problem, the reason for the widespread hysteria, lay in the public's absolute confusion. What truly triggers a tsunami? PHI Volks, PTWC, and Pagasa all agree on the unchangeable scientific rule. A true, catastrophic tsunami in the Philippines requires one of two massive geological events, either a powerful offshore earthquake or a massive underwater landslide. Typhoons, by their atmospheric nature, cannot directly cause a tsunami. This scientific truth became the first casualty of the failed warning system. The scientific contradiction became the core of the crisis. Super Typhoon Fun Wong was physically devastating, but it carried zero seismic threat. The panic was entirely manufactured by a single, critical failure in the early warning system itself. This is the terrifying moment where technology, designed to save lives, instead creates a psychological disaster. The confusion, we now know, often originates from the siren towers used in many coastal barangays. These identical towers are tragically programmed for both tsunami and storm surge alerts. During a high-stress, high-velocity storm event like Fun Wong, local officials operating under immense pressure and without the institutional bandwidth for perfect execution may sound the general siren to warn of rapidly rising water. But tragically, they sometimes trigger the tsunami mode by mistake, or because the system simply lacks a distinct, separate setting for a surge warning. The data confirms this structural weakness. Device logs recovered from towns in Aurora and Camarines Norte showed multiple, verifiable cases where the wrong siren mode was activated during the very peak of the surge threat. This wasn't a one-time isolated human error. This was a systemic flaw that exploited the public's deepest fears. Furthermore, in past years, vulnerable sensors have been known to misfire even without human intervention, detecting sudden changes in sea level caused only by wind-driven waves or the surge itself, yet misinterpreting this data as genuine seismic activity. This is the ultimate test of the public's institutional trust. When the siren screams one thing, but the official science says another, which signal is true? The key lies in understanding the rigorous, non-negotiable protocol followed by the lead agencies. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, PHIVOLCS, and the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, PTWC, operate under a strict, centralized command. When a significant offshore earthquake is genuinely detected, their teams analyze the data within minutes, following an established, unbending protocol. If a tsunami is deemed likely, they issue a formal bulletin immediately first online, then disseminated rapidly via radio, television, and local government text alerts. The silence on the official channels regarding a seismic event was, therefore, the most vital piece of counter-evidence available. The message from PHI Volks was unambiguous. The confirmed threat is the storm surge, and a tsunami warning only follows a real offshore earthquake. This distinction is the bedrock of public safety, separating the genuine threat from the catastrophic rumor. The consequence of this warning confusion is devastating. It immediately fuels the rumor mill on social media, turning isolated technical flaws into mass hysteria. Panic spreads faster than the floodwaters, eroding the very trust needed for orderly and effective mass evacuation. The citizens who acted on the siren's false call wasted precious minutes they should have used to fortify their homes or move calmly to a confirmed shelter, exposing them to the real, immediate dangers of the storm surge and high wind. The psychological contract between the state and its citizens is dangerously thin in the eye of the storm. When the siren sounds the wrong alarm, the only defense left is actionable truth. For every citizen caught in this terrifying loop of warning confusion, the path to survival is now strictly defined by adherence to established, verified protocols. Survival rests on these three non-negotiable steps. Firstly, verify before panic. You must understand that the official bulletin is the ultimate authority in a tsunami event. When the siren blares, you must immediately cross-reference the signal with official channels. The definitive sources, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, PTWC, PHI Volks, and PAGASA, will issue a formal, widespread bulletin within minutes of detecting a significant offshore earthquake. If these agencies are silent on a tsunami, the danger is localized, likely a storm surge, and the alarm is an error. This moment of cross-referencing is your crucial time saver. It separates the informed survivor from the panicked victim. Secondly, act on the confirmed threat. In the case of Super Typhoon Fun Wong, the confirmed ocean threat was, and remains, the storm surge. The difference between the two is vital. A tsunami demands vertical evacuation to high ground away from the coast, while storm surge requires evacuation inland, away from the immediate shore and low-lying river mouths. By verifying the threat, you ensure your action is targeted and effective, avoiding the tragic mistake of moving in the wrong direction or wasting time due to the false alarm. Finally, leverage institutional trust. The public's long-term reliance on the system is the hidden infrastructure that saves lives. We call this the resilience dividend. The damage inflicted by the storm surge is only amplified by the trust deficit created when the public believes the authorities are either lying or incompetent. Your duty is not only to save yourself, but to reinforce the integrity of the official message by sharing only the verified bulletins, not the social media rumors. Right now, for the nearly 110 million Filipinos who face a future of more intense, back-to-back typhoons, the most valuable lesson is not about sandbags or seawalls. It is about establishing a continuity of communication and rebuilding the institutional bandwidth that failed in this crisis. The government's priority must shift from simply issuing warnings to ensuring the public has the tools, the knowledge, the apps, and the verified data streams to discern between a genuine signal and catastrophic noise. The ultimate message from Super Typhoon Yuan is a brutal, necessary education. You must be your own information gatekeeper. Listen to the local radio, check the official websites of PAGASA and PHI Volks, and only then act. The final, brutal assessment from Super Typhoon Fun Wong is that the Philippines now faces a future where the physical threat is relentlessly compounded by the digital chaos. Fueled by record-warm Pacific waters, these super typhoons are projected to strike closer together, leaving less time for physical and psychological recovery. The nation's ability to survive, and, more importantly, to recover, hinges not just on rebuilding damaged bridges and seawalls, but on restoring the fractured institutional trust. The critical lesson remains: you must internalize the science to survive the misinformation. A true tsunami requires an offshore earthquake or an underwater landslide, events completely unrelated to the typhoon's winds or rain. When you hear the alarming, terrifying sound of a siren, your immediate defense mechanism must be a simple, life-saving question. Has PHIVOLCS issued a formal seismic bulletin? The reality is that storm surge is the confirmed enemy in the face of a typhoon, demanding a different, targeted evacuation strategy. The tragic misfire of the siren system, the very failure that manufactured the panic, exploited the public's lack of clarity on this scientific distinction. For those who lived through this crisis, the path forward is clear: rebuild with resilience and demand information integrity. The government must urgently fix the flaw in the siren systems, ensuring that surge warnings are unequivocally distinct from the terrifying call of a tsunami. The public must commit to acting only on the basis of verified data from reliable sources like PAGASA and the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center. In the end, the ultimate infrastructure is not concrete or steel. It is the shared, unquestioned belief in the factual, official message. The final call to action. Right now, the confirmed ocean threat is storm surge. Only act on tsunami warnings if you see official bulletins from the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, or PAGASA. When in doubt, check their websites, listen to local radio, or ask barangay officials for the latest advisory. In storms like these, clear warnings save lives. Rumors do not.